How long is the top of this desk? How far is the desk from the wall? Let's do some measuring and see what we can come up with. Doug and Randy are going to do some experiments in measuring. The boys have no standard units to do the measuring. Each will use parts of their body to measure the desk and floor. They will use their hands and feet as units of measurement. Randy starts off by measuring the length of the desk. He finds that the desk is 13 hands long. Let's watch Doug, who will now do the measuring. He finds that the desk is 15 hands long. He didn't get the same answer as Randy. Both boys will measure the floor using their feet as a measuring unit. Doug goes first. He finds that the floor is 7-foot lengths long. And when Randy measures the floor using his feet as a unit of measurement, he finds that the floor is 6-foot lengths long. Both experiments showed us that it was impossible to agree on the measurement. This is because the units varied with the dimension of each one. They use the same units, but each unit is relative to the size of the person using it. What Doug and Randy have shown is how the earliest forms of measurement were made. All measurement was based on some practical object or part of the body. Nothing was standard. Every unit was relative to the size of the person using it. This woman is buying cloth measured by the yard, which is the length from the tip of the nose to the end of the outstretched arm. But that measured yard is certainly shorter when a boy measures it than it would be if a grown-up did the measuring. Once it was established that there was a need for measuring units, people invented some. The cubit was the length from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. Noah built an ark which was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The Roman soldiers measured their marching distance in paces. The pace was the distance from the heel to where the same heel next touched the ground. Body units were a simple and easy measuring device. Even for making a bow and arrow, the proper bow length was from the ground to the man's chin. And the arrow? Well, he drew a stick back as though he were shooting it with the bow. When he had drawn it back to the full reach of his arms, that was the right length. An object could also be used as a measuring unit. A man building a fence would cut the first post to the desired height and use it to mark off the others. He had a standard, a very sensible idea, and people started to think of standardizing measuring units so the units would be the same for everyone. The idea of standard measurement was soon adopted everywhere the unit was introduced. Remember how the cubit was measured? It was the distance from a man's elbow to the tip of his middle finger. The Greeks and later the Romans agreed upon a standard cubit called the Olympic cubit. It was equal to about 18 inches. They agreed that 2/3 of the Olympic cubit should be called a foot. The foot was divided into 12 parts, which the Romans called uncia, meaning twelfths. The Roman Empire spread across Europe, and the Romans brought their measurements of the foot and the uncia with them. They eventually reached and conquered Britain. The people of Britain who didn't speak Latin pronounced the uncia in their own way. They called it the inch. 12 inches make a foot. Later, another standard measure was introduced, the yard. It was agreed that the standard yard should equal 3 feet. 12 inches equal 1 foot, 3 feet equal 1 yard. Now the merchants had a standard measurement for measuring cloth. Whoever served it, the same amount would be given to anyone who bought a yard of material. The standard measurement was the answer. The system of standard measurements worked out very well, and more units came into use. One was the rod. In the 16th century, the rod was defined as a unit of length which would be equal to 5½ yards. The rod took its place among the standard units. And the farmer who measured his fields in furrow lengths or furlongs then had a standard furlong. It was equal to exactly 220 yards. And the furlong was added to the system of standard units. Then came the mile from the Romans millipassus, meaning 1,000 paces. When the English standardized their measurements, they decided to make the mile exactly 8 furlongs. And so there was a standard system of length units from the inch to the mile. But still other units were introduced, as men used the tools of their trade. The surveyors used long chains for their work, and the chain became a standard unit, equal to 22 yards. And the seaman's measure, the fathom, also became a unit. They measured the depth of the ocean in fathoms. 1 fathom is 6 feet. This is the imperial system of measurement which was being used throughout most of the English-speaking nations of the world. Feet, yards, rods, furlongs. It's getting a bit complicated, isn't it? And the numbers are so awkward. In continental Europe, they also had their own units of measurements, which varied from one region to another. All these countries traded with one another, and things were a little difficult with each country or region having its own units of measurements. Then came the French Revolution. It was a time of change. It brought new ideas and new laws. The French government decided to introduce the metric system, which was soon adopted by all trading partners of continental Europe. Why was the metric system so eagerly adopted? At that time, France, and indeed all of Europe, was dominated by Napoleon and his armies. The introduction of the metric system was greatly assisted by France's military might, but the system was also eagerly adopted because it was consistent and logical. The French committee appointed to devise a new system of measurement wanted it to be a natural one, based on some fact of nature, something related to the size of the Earth. They decided to create a unit which would relate to 1/4 of the distance around the Earth. That is the distance from the equator to the North Pole. The committee chose a very small portion of that measurement as a convenient length for everyday use. It decided to make the standard unit 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator. This unit is called the meter. Today a more scientific definition is given, though it is the same base unit of length, the meter. It comes from the Greek word metron, meaning measure. Other units were added to form the metric system in a consistent and logical way, and all were based on multiples or submultiples of the meter. But the metric system existed for almost 200 years before it was given full international recognition. This system also deals with the measurement of temperature, mass, volume, area, and many other quantities. This system is now called the International System of Units, and its abbreviation is SI for the French phrase Système International d'Unité. The SI is the modernized international metric system.